Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's Planning Committee meeting. I'm Councillor Karimi Govanlu, and I'll be chairing the Planning Committee meeting today. We are not expecting a fire drill today, but if the alarm does sound, the fire exits are clearly signed in green. This meeting is being live streamed. Members of the public are welcome to film proceedings as long as they are not disruptive to the conduct of the meeting. If anyone wishes to film or record this meeting, please identify yourselves now. Okay, thank you. Please can you ensure all your mobile phones and electronic devices are turned to silent. Councillors, please do not use your mobile phone whilst the committee is in session. We will have comfort breaks if needed. If you must use your mobile, then please leave the room. However, you will appreciate this could result in you not being able to vote on the matter under discussion at the time you leave the room. The order of business is as set out on the agenda. Members of the public can only speak if prior arrangements have been made in accordance with the Council's scheme of public speaking. The time allocated is a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. Only people who have registered to speak will be able to address the committee. The order will be as follows. The planning officer will present the application. Public speakers will then be asked to present their case, followed by questions from members of the committee to clarify something the speaker has said and not to invite the speaker to put further points across. The order of public speaking is parish town council first, followed by objectors and finally supporters. Council members who are not members of this committee will then be invited to speak for the allocated time of a maximum of 5 minutes per speaker. This will then be followed by questions from members of the committee. Again, these questions are not to invite the speaker to put further points across, but just to clarify what they've said. The committee will then discuss and determine the application. Finally, there is no provision for members of the public to circulate documents or photographs during the meeting. Are there any questions before I open the meeting? No? Thank you. We go to declarations of interest. I understand we've all been lobbied for the first 3 applications. Jo?
Thank you, Chair. I have a personal and non-pecuniary interest in the first application at Alderford and the application at Lingwood. I'm a member of the Broad's Internal Drainage Board, and Lingwood is within the watershed, but I don't think it particularly affects this application. Thank you.
Okay, I understand you're going to remove yourself for the first application.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. Abu?
Item number 6 and 7, Elsham's Feathers Park. So I'm one of the ward member from Elsham, so I didn't make any comments or whatever in Elsham Town Council meeting. So.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I declare an interest in agenda item 3D, also the Feathers Pub, just because I'm an ordinary member of CAMRA. That's the Campaign for Real Ale.
I'm declaring an interest in the Helston application as I'm a member of Helston Parish Council.
Nigel?
I'm also on the Broad's Internal Drainage Board with regarding the application at Lingwood.
Nobody else? Yeah, please. Actually, we'll go through apologies while Joe's leaving. Lucy, do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillor Tipple, Councillor Clancy with Councillor Crotch as substitute, and Councillor Berry with Councillor Brennan as substitute.
Thank you. Right, first application is the Alderford application 2025-1969, land south of Hall Road, and I'm going to hand over to Glenn Beaumont to present the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. Application is for the installation and operation of a solar farm together with all associated works, equipment and necessary infrastructure at land to the south of Hall Road in Alderford. Application is before you at the request of Councillor Bullman for the reasons given in section 4.2 of the report. And there's a couple of updates which I'm sure you've familiarised yourself with on the update sheet, including from the Environment Agency. And doubtless you've read the video, seen the video sent in by Sally Knights in advance of committee as well. So Before I get into some of the key considerations, it's probably useful to give you a geographical context of the site and what's around it. So the site is denoted by the yellow dot in the centre of the screen. Core of Alderford is a short hop to the northeast, as you can see by the label Alderford. And in terms of what's around it, and we'll see this in a closer up view, we've got the River Wensum sort of winding its way to the south of the site. Lenwade Industrial Estate also to the south of the site. You've got the Dinosaur Parks, I'm sure a number of you are familiar with that, further to the southwest, and that's probably the most well-known point in the area. And then Reefham Road to the east and northeast, and Fakenham Road to the south and southeast, which eventually connect into the NDR. At this stage, it's probably the best plan for me to point out the construction route to the site. So that will be from the A1067, Fakenham Road, along Porter's Lane, hanging right onto Hall Road, past the old Bernard Matthews factory, and then, as we'll see later, just to the tip of where the cursor is, just here in the northwest corner of the site. In closer quarters, again, the site is in the centre of the screen there, and just go through some of the annotations. So the butterflies indicate the county wildlife sites. Probably can't really tell on this image, but there's some listed buildings as well with orange stars. So if I just go through them left to right, we've got the Grade 2 star Great Witchingham Hall on the left-hand side of the screen. The lodge, which is supposed to be 150 metres to the north of Great Witchingham Hall, but it's actually 400 odds because Historic England haven't plotted it incorrectly. Also worth pointing out that lodge was demolished in 1985, so it's no longer there, and we've made Historic England aware of that. And then behind where that would have sat is a Grade 2 listed wall, which would have formed part of the kitchen garden of Great Witchingham Hall as well. And behind that forms part of the former Bernard Matthews food site. To the northeast of the site, we've got the Grade 2 star listed Church of St John the Baptist, and then another short hop to the east of that, we've got two Grade 2 listed barns. A Grade 2 listed barn and a Grade 2 listed farmhouse. Some of the things that are around, we've got some triple SIs in the yellow, so that's the River Wensum and Alderford Common. And then if I just go back a slide as well. So this kind of construction corridor that you can see snaking through from north to south is the Hornsey 3 offshore cable route, which when I did my initial site visits in the summer, construction of that was well underway. When I visited last week, that construction work appeared to be largely complete and the land restored. So looking at the block plan and the detail of the application, key considerations are set out in section 5.1 of the report. I'm not going to go through each and every one as part of this presentation, which is going to be long enough already. Perhaps the key ones: the principle of development, impact on the character and appearance of the area, heritage, highway safety, best and most versatile land, and ecology. I'll touch upon those in varying degrees of detail as we go through the slides. So starting with the principle of development, so the application proposes a 28 megawatt solar farm that will be operational for 40 years. And by way of confirmation, no battery storage is being proposed. In terms of the general principle of development, you've been around this track enough times before to know that the general principle is supported by both local planning and national planning policy guidance. And in particular, I draw your attention to paragraph 168 of the MPPF, and I'm going to read this bit, which gives significant weight to the benefits associated with such schemes and their contributions to a net zero future. So without wishing to gild the lily on this, a significant amount of weight is a substantial amount of weight. So if at the end of proceedings today you're minded to refuse this application, your reason for refusal will correspondingly need to be significant to outweigh the significance attributed to approving these applications. So in the layout plan, we've got the solar panels in a number of blocks. These are somewhat influenced by some of the things going on within the site. So we've got a hedgerow that runs on the diagonal north to south in the northern part of the site, and then sort of more perpendicular to the bottom of the screen is an overhead electricity wire. So yeah, we've got a number, 80,000 solar panels in rows that are set 3 metres apart. And going through some of the features, which we'll see in more detail shortly, the green line that you can see going around the site is the 2 metre high perimeter fence with a track inside of it. The three orange dots are the transformers and inverters, and we've got the access to the northwest of the site, and there's a cluster of buildings associated with that when the electricity will transfer into the national grid in the appropriate way. And then we can also see some of these dots. So the dots are the CCTV cameras that are going to be positioned at various points around the site. Connection point is provisionally secured for 2033. Those of you that attended the Corston application in December will be aware that the connections procedure is being reformed as we speak. So it'll be a sort of a first ready, first plugged into the grid system, and at the moment it was almost a case of anybody could advance a parcel of land and get their connection secured, but they wouldn't have necessarily have the application as far as advanced as this. So as part of the reform systems, the electricity operators such as National Grid are seeking to strip out the deadwood from the connection scheme and try and speed up things and make it a bit more efficient. So this is part of a stepping stone towards securing an earlier connection in all likelihood. We're going to look at some of the features that are on site. We've got 2.5 metre high solar panels which are going to be fixed into the ground on poles as opposed to concrete shoes. They'll be between 400 and 500 millimetres above ground level at the base according to ground conditions, and these will be fixed and not tracking panels. In the northwest corner of the site we've got a couple of buildings, a customer building and a DNO building, so these are where this is where sort of the business part of it happens, with the electricity being generated on site converted into a manner that is safe for the grid system. And then there's a control room as well, I beg your pardon, next to that, which will be also used for storage purposes for any equipment. The transformers and inverters are those 3 red blobs in the centre and southern parts of the site. So these are 2.7 metres in height. And the CCTV cameras, the 20 odd that are dotted around the perimeter of the site, are going to be 4.2 metres in height, fairly slimline in their appearance nevertheless. And the perimeter fence will be a deer fence, either fixed to galvanised steel or wooden posts, 2 metres in height, and in the bottom left-hand corner are the entrance gates. If I just go back a couple of slides, it's probably just going to be useful for me to plot the route we're going to take. So we're going to start at this point here on the right hand side on Station Road, then we're going to kind of work our way to Reefham Road, and then we're going to head north off screen, come back down Springwell Lane, take a photo down here, and then start working our way down Hall Road. And then when we get to this point here, there's a photo from the south that I'll show you, and then we'll go back the other way and work our way from the east to west along Hall Road, and then we'll see a few photos within the site as well, just so you can get a feel of how the site sits within the surrounding area, and also how surrounding features are seen from within the site as well. So if we start from Station Road to the east, if you can make that out in the top left hand corner, whether it's on your small screens or big screens. So if you follow the cursor, that photo is taken from about half a mile to the east. The application site is sort of above the first row of trees. You can just see a sort of a clear strip, if you like. That's the northern extent of the site. And this is really the only sort of long distance view of any part of the site. And given what's around it, you can see, in my view at least, that the solar panels are going to be pretty well absorbed by the surrounding landscape. This is a winter picture, so this is probably the worst case scenario of what you will see. When the trees start to come in leaf, then that absorption or assimilation, if you like, will be further enabled. This is a view from the junction of Hall Road and Reefham Road. So if we just go back one, forgive me for skipping between slides. So that's taken from this point here, and the bank of trees is this woodland belt just there. So again, you can see that the site is fairly well screened from that viewpoint to the northeast, and that is the same pretty much now as it is when this image was taken in 2024. From Church Farm Lane to the north, so we've gone further up the Reefham Road and taken the first left, and this is taken between these two woodland blocks. Again, the site is not visible. You can't see Alderford Church, let alone the application site. And then further to the west, we've gone further along Church Farm Lane, taken a left, gone down Springwell Lane, Great Witchingham Hall, Grade 2-star building just on the right hand side there, and you can see with the undulating land and the vegetation, the site is not visible when looking from that direction. We then head further south and just gone to the bottom of Springwell Lane, taken a right, turned back round. This is one of the entrances to Great Witchingham Hall, and to make the point again, the undulations of the land means that the site is not particularly visible from this viewpoint either. And then we've gone a little further up. So I've gone to about level with this tree line here. And the connection route will go through this gap and run parallel with this woodland. Our tree officer has not raised any concerns about that. The cabled route will be outside the root protection area of those trees. And there's just a clearing here where there's a pole-mounted connection point, which is where the site will eventually connect into. So pivoting right and going further along, on the right-hand side you've got the former Bernard Matthews site, and on the left we've got the non-existent Grade 2 listed lodge. And this is just before the weight restriction kicks in as we head further down Hall Road. Those of you that are familiar with the Bernard Matthews site will know that it was in its heyday a well-used site used by a range of different vehicle types. Highways hasn't objected to the continued use of Hall Road for the construction period, subject to planning conditions, and then as we get further towards the site and the weight restriction, so I've probably stepped about 50 metres further forward. This is the property known as Two Keys, just here opposite the northwest corner of the site. The road starting to narrow down, as we'll see here, but you'll also notice that the site still isn't visible thanks to that roadside hedging, and it's rather emphasising the point that I made in the report that there's no wider landscape impacts or no significant landscape impacts of this development. And then we're now heading towards the site, so it forks to the left, Hall Road, and then to the right is the track that runs down the western boundary of the site, and the access point is probably going to be just about where this pole is. And then we're now on top of the site. We've got highways drawing coming up soon, so your reference point here is this set of trees which are going to be removed to accommodate a 7 metre wide access, with the widening of the roads to 6 metres to provide the passing place next to that. Gone a bit further up, turned round, Two Keys, just to the right hand side is where the passing place is going to be widened, and then here's the drawing to show that. So that's the track, and if you imagine the curve of the track to the right hand side will just sort of blend into this one here, and the visibility displays shown in the green, if you can make that out. So the construction period is anticipated to be about 9 months, and further information on the type of vehicular movements is provided in the report, and again to say that the Highway Authority hasn't objected to the application. Going a bit further east, this just gives you a different perspective of where the access will be. And then going down the track, which is a mature high hedge, which sort of try and judge in terms of the height. I'm about 5'9". If I put my hand up in the air, I still couldn't touch the top of that hedge, so it's probably sort of 2.3 plus metres high. And then I've gone down the track, I'm in the water meadow to the south, and this is the tree belt along the southern boundary. So I'm looking north here, and this effectively screens the site from that direction. Even in the winter, there's effective screening, and when I went down the Marriott's Way, I didn't take a photo because it's simply of trees, and there's nothing to see really. So we're now to the east, northeast of the site on Hall Road. So I've gone a bit further down Reefham Road, past where that line of trees was on the left-hand side. So Grade 2 listed Church of St John the Baptist on the right. And we're just going to sort of head down here, take photos at various intervals until we're on top of the site. So immediately outside the churchyard and the steps leading to the church, you can see again that the site is not visible within the sort of historic core of Alderford around the Reefham Road. Within the churchyard itself, so I'm standing outside the front entrance of the church itself, looking towards the site. Can't see it. And then we're now starting to head towards the site as well, to just outside Plough Meadow Cottage, which is the last property before you get to that northeast part of the site. And the views are going to start opening out a little bit, as you can see here. So this viewpoint is just taken at the driveway to Plough Meadow Cottage, looking to the southwest, but also note the position of the red line. So the site is not going to come hard up to where we see here. You can probably see these sort of, well, they're actually cones on site. You won't be able to make that out, but you can notice a difference in coloration. So that's sort of the rough position of the underground cable route, and the application site, if you like, the boundary will follow the route of those away from us and further in towards that woodland to the east. A bit further along, before we get to the works access that was used for the underground cable works, you can perhaps see a little better what are the inspection chambers for the cable route, and this is the previous compound. So if you follow the end of that hedgerow and just follow that line along there, again that's an approximation of where the northeast boundary of the site will be. It is nevertheless open at present, and clearly it's going to take a little bit of time for the proposed hedgerow to mature, but in due course it's anticipated that with proper management that will screen the site reasonably effectively within localised views. Impacts are going to be localised and not wider. And from the compound, pretty much in the sort of the centre point of Hall Road relative to the site, we're just looking south. So we've got that hedgerow going into the distance, and then it starts to thicken up a bit further to the right, still a bit gappy in places. And then, rather than subject you to even more photos of hedgerows, here's a snapshot of those that I took. And then as we get closer to the northwest corner of the site, again, just putting in the full picture, as much as there is some thickness to the hedges, there's gappiness too. So I just want you to remind you of this before we get into some photos within the site itself, just so you can reorientate yourself. So application site follows the extent of the development consent order boundary for the Hornsey 3, and is immediately to the south of that in 3 fields, but different numbers of blocks according to the hedges and the overhead cables and what else is in and around the site. So I'm just inside the western boundary of the site here. This is the woodland belt running through the centre of the site. You can see that this part of the site is particularly well screened from Hall Road particularly. You can barely make out Hall Road Farm to the north just there. It's quite distant from those properties. These transformers, this is the nearest transformer to an inverter to any sort of property. That's a distance of approximately 260 metres, so that's a good distance, and we can use a noise condition to ensure that the amenity of that property is secured. And then I've just sort of pivoted round to the south, and this is the southern boundary of the site. This photo was taken last week. So again, good level of screening just there. down towards the River Wensum, which isn't immediately adjacent to the site, but the nearest point is over 120 metres from the site, with that water meadow providing that point of separation. And then I'm strolling along the southern boundary here, looking south. This is the woodland belt, just here. Can't see anything beyond that. And I'm looking west, seeing if I can find the Grade 2 listed Great Witchingham Hall. Whether this photo or one that I took but haven't shown further south, you simply can't see Great Witchingham Hall. This is the only part of the former Bernard Matthews site that you can see. So with that in mind, the impact on the setting and special historic interest of Great Witchingham Hall will be retained and unaffected by this development. So I've got into the northern section of the western part of the site, and now starting to approach some of the properties to the north. Got 2 quays just here, and Hall Road Farm just there. Deliberately taken from the point at which the transformer will be positioned, just to give you an indication of that level of separation on the ground, and the lack of visibility as well because of the way the topography of the land. And then much closer to the northern boundary, opposite Hall Road Farm. So the point I make in the report is that there will be visibility from the upper floor windows of that property, but in view of the level of separation, despite the view, I don't consider there are sufficient grounds on which to refuse the application on residential amenity. Now in the eastern part of the application site, so up here, this is a panoramic view. This is the tree belt along the eastern boundary, and then the historic part of Alderford just to the left there, and the northern section of the site on the left hand side of the screen, tree belt along the southern boundary to the right. And then walking towards the northern part of the site, you've got the top part of the church of St John the Baptist just there, and these listed barns are sort of just beyond the tree belt here to the right, and the farmhouse as well. And to emphasise the point made by Historic England and our own senior heritage officer, setting of those buildings will be largely unaffected by development, but we have to also weigh any perceived impact on their significance against the public benefits arising from this development, which I've already spoken about. The presumption in favour of renewable energy and the public benefits associated with that outweigh the very low end or less than substantial harm excuse me, to those buildings. And the landscape strategy plan. So this is more of a kind of a master plan, and if you're going to approve this today, we can secure the detail of that through a planning condition in terms of the density and type of planting. You can see that you won't be able to see, so I'll have to tell you. So the existing hedgerows to be retained and enhanced where possible. So that will include plugging in the gaps with new planting, buffer zones around the woodland belt in the centre of the site, and also a 30-metre buffer zone around the edge of the site to the woodland, and a buffer zone to the south as well to the woodland here. Biodiversity net gain is a requirement, a minimum 10% uplift in that. The applicant is looking to provide an approximately 60% uplift in the number of hedgerow units, 23% in habitat, so that's going to be your wildflower meadow and your grass mix, and just over a 10% uplift in watercourse units. So these are, a minimum 10% is a statutory requirement. It's delivering that and then some as well, and that is a benefit that weighs in favour of the application. Other ecological enhancements include bird boxes, bat boxes and habitat piles, and these can be secured through appropriately worded planning conditions, along with any mitigation measures that are necessary as well. You might recall from the report there's a requirement to provide skylark plots to replace those that are going to be lost from this development. They are going to be secured through a Section 106 agreement because they need to be provided off-site, and I understand that the landowner owns a good chunk of land in and around the area and should be able to provide those. We haven't explored that in the full detail yet because solar applications are what they are, and this application may not get approved today, so not much effort has been expended in doing that just yet, but they will be in the event of it being approved. And then agricultural land and the use of best and most versatile land. So the blue is your grade 2 land, and the dark green is 3A land. That's best and most versatile agricultural land. Natural England's maps indicate that the likelihood of much of the surrounding area is also best and most versatile agricultural land. So this suggests that it's not a scarce resource across the district. NPPF and national guidance suggest a preference of finding poorer quality land as opposed to higher quality land for these types of development, but it's not a requirement, it's a preference. There's no local plan policies that require that to happen, and there's no legislative requirement for that to happen either. And then a number of concerns have been raised in relation to food security as well. So looking at previous appeal decisions that we had, so one in Horsford in particular that was considered probably about June last year, I think the appeal was issued. The inspector for that set out that the UK produces 70% of what we consume, and this has broadly been stable for the last 20 years. The government doesn't seek to increase food production, and so the remaining 25% of food is addressed through imported foods to allow for choice, and those that are out of season in the UK, such as your strawberries from Spain at this time of year. This has allowed DEFRA to conclude that the UK has a large and resilient food supply chain, and moreover, in terms of solar farms being seen as taking over the countryside, there's a written ministerial statement from May 2024 that sets out that even in the worst case scenarios, less than 1% of UK land UK agricultural land will be occupied by solar farms. So within that context, it seems to me that the development will have a minimal total effect on the nation's food security. In addition to that, recognising the site will clearly change as a consequence of this development. It's a temporary development, 40 years. It's quite a long time, but it's temporary nevertheless. And the underlying point is that the agricultural use isn't being permanently lost and will be restored when this development has ceased. The applicant has said that the site might be used by grazing sheep. Take that with a pinch of salt if you want, or you can believe it. I've not seen a solar farm with grazing sheep on it to date. But nevertheless, that's an agreement between the landowner and the site operator, and not something that we would secure through a planning condition. Overriding point is that, having regard to the fact that the use of the site as a solar farm will be temporary, agricultural land will be restored afterwards and is not being permanently lost. The impacts on BMV will be acceptable and will not result in significant adverse effects. Final slide. So to conclude, there is strong in-principle planning policy support for solar farms and renewable energy projects. You're aware of that? It's worth saying anyway. And paragraph 168 of the NPPF guides local planning authorities to give significant weight to the benefits associated with these. As the report sets out, the development will provide enough annual electricity for approximately 7,670 homes a year, and over its lifetime will save approximately 1.5 million tonnes of carbon dioxide. So either in this report or in the presentation, I've considered and assessed the impacts of the following. So that is the character and appearance of the area, residential amenity, heritage assets, trees, ecology, highway safety, BMV land, and particularly within the report, the cumulative impacts alongside other energy developments within the localish sort of area. As far as the cumulative impacts are concerned, the impacts won't be significant. You don't have any sort of shared eyeline views between other solar farms with this site and any others. And any impacts that will occur will either be acceptable or they can be mitigated through appropriately worded planning conditions or the legal agreement. So ultimately, the application is an acceptable form of development, complies with the relevant national planning guidance and policies of the local development plan, and subject to the expiry of the reconsultation period and the use of a Section 106 agreement to secure off-site Skylark plots, Chair, is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Glenn, for that very comprehensive presentation. Does any members of the committee want anything clarified?
I just want to clarify, is the site producing any food crop at present?
During my visit, it was laid to grass. There was a corn crop which didn't look like it had produced much just to the north of the tree belt, but it's arable farmland nevertheless, so the potential is there for it to be used for food.
Yes, could I just ask about the perimeter fencing? Will it allow for other animals to get underneath and in and out of the site? So I believe it is deer-proof, but how about smaller animals?
Yeah, the intention is for badger holes to be provided, for example, and to enable sort of hedgehogs to fit through the gaps, and we can secure the detail of that through one of the recommended planning conditions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a couple of clarifications. Just in some of the reports I've seen mention of bats being present. I don't recall you mentioning that. Apologies if I missed it. Can you just clarify the position whether there is these particular species of bats on premises? And then the second clarification is just in respect of is there an agreed connection to the grid, or is that easily achievable? Because I know sometimes these are sort of put in and then there isn't a connection. So do we have any clarification on that?
So the grid connection point has been agreed, and it's to the northwest at this point here. A provisional date for that is 2033, but if this gets planning permission as part of the government reforms of the connection process, that will likely come forward. As far as the bats are concerned, this area is part of understood to be part of a sort of wider tapestry, if you like, for Barbastelle bats. I hope I've pronounced that correctly. But the site itself is not considered to contain any features that would accommodate roosting or hibernating bats, for example, more for commuting or foraging bats. And one of the reasons for providing the buffer zones further away from those tree belts to the south and east was to sort of give that space to allow bats to continue to commute along those receptors. I don't know if that's sort of features, if you like.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a very balanced view because I think you've covered the issues quite a lot. But what I was concerned about was page 19, it says the correct approach to take to minimise the conflict is to avoid using best and most versatile land. And we know, don't we, from page 13, 4.2, that 87% of this land is BMV. How do you feel with the present situation we have in regard to cost of living and cost of food, and the importance, which is what is stressed on page 19, minimise the conflict to avoid using best and most versatile land? That does concern me, Chairman.
I mean, in terms of cost of living and things like that, that's I may have a personal view on that, but with a sort of my planning hat on, that's not particularly relevant to the determination of the application. As far as the use of best and most versatile land is concerned, I set out in the report and the presentation that there's guidance to find land of lower quality first, but it's not a statutory requirement. We don't have a planning policy that requires that, and there isn't a requirement in law on that either, and there is some case law surrounding that as well.
Thank you. In the report in paragraph 4.1, Great Witchingham Parish Council raised the issue. They were concerned that the applicant had not carried out a full ecological assessment, instead relying on a basic desk study, and has failed to identify local bat populations or other species at risk. Can I just clarify that since presumably those comments were made by the Parish Council, more assessment was done on the ecological situation?
That's right. So when the application first came in, a preliminary ecological assessment was provided, and that is as the name suggests, a preliminary desktop type job. But following the submission of comments from Parish Council and other consultees, an ecological impact assessment was undertaken, which included the likes of bird surveys, for example.
Thank you. And another question on page 17, the Norfolk Wildlife Trust recognises that it's an important site for lapwings and skylarks. I see there's been mitigation provided for skylarks in terms of 6 plots being provided, but there seems to be no mitigation provided for lapwings. Was that looked at and it was decided that it was not appropriate to do that?
Yeah, I consider that in the report in section 5.51. So it's you've got sort of difference in professional opinion between Norfolk Wildlife Trust and the applicant's own ecologist, who's a well-known ecologist that we come across a fair amount. He didn't consider there was a need to provide mitigation.
Okay, thank you.
There's no further questions for the officer. I'll call the first speakers. Got James Richardson and Christopher Drayson. Would you like to come to the front, please, to the public speaking table? Gentlemen, you have 5 minutes each to speak, and you just press the right-hand button to switch the mic on.
Good morning. I was born and have lived all my life in rural Norfolk, the last 52 years close to Alderford, and I'm here today to speak in one voice for the many people who cannot be here. I believe as a country we need to rethink how we live and provide alternative ways of producing the services we, as a society, require to live. The government has decided that we need to be energy efficient ourselves and not to be reliant on other countries to help provide our energy needs. Solar panels are one possible way to help achieve this goal, and I feel we all need to accept this. The question is, where do we put them? It seems crazy to contemplate installing them on good BMV agricultural land, used to produce food to feed the country. We are heading into a situation where we will provide electricity to cook food to sustain the country, but will have lost the heavy grain and crop yields from the farmland taken for solar panels, so that more food will need to be imported from other parts of the world to feed ourselves. We will be replacing energy reliance on other countries with relying on other countries to provide us with food. Currently, according to Google, as a country, we import 40% of all the food we require. We import 15 to 20% of the wheat we require. In 2024 to 2025, this equated to 3.06 million tonnes of wheat alone, the highest in 1992. To contemplate increasing these figures seems foolhardy. The proposed solar farm is in the Wensum Valley and adjacent to the River Wensum. The Wensum has a diverse ecology. We, as privileged and temporary custodians of this special environment, should not be allowed to bloat this important natural area with solar panels. We know the rare, protected and internationally important Barbicel bat super colony at Western Longville uses this proposed solar site to feed. Dr. C. Packman of the Wensum Valley Bat Group has said unequivocally that they do not consider this site at this very sensitive and ecologically important location to be suitable for solar panels. Indeed, Natural England has already put the Barbicel super colonies key areas on our triple SI designations programme. The River Wensum is a triple SI and SAC river. What impact will the development have on the site and the River Wensum in the years While it is leased until 2067, we do not know. Nobody does, until it is possibly too late to rectify any damage caused. No research of that duration has been undertaken. Road access to the proposed site will be from the A1067 at Lemwade. Heavy traffic will go via two adjacent single-lane bridges and via a narrow section of the road between Burnham Matthews and the proposed site entrance. That entrance is on a sharp bend that locals know is the scene of many unreported road accidents. The narrow rural road in Alderford is a typical rural road. It has no curbing, which means any consistent and heavy traffic which uses the road is likely to cause serious damage to the road edges, as can be seen on large sections of the Reefham Road now. But, as stated earlier, we have to have somewhere to install the solar farms. Why aren't we using Norfolk's many redundant Second World War air bases? We have numerous ones with intact runways, distributed roads, and adjoining non-productive flat land. I believe the main runway at Western Longville is approximately 1.5 miles long. Norwich Airport has vast swathes of grassland on site too. New houses are being built locally, and industrial warehouses of vast sizes are under construction. Surely these developments should have solar panels installed on their roofs. What a missed opportunities there are to retain our good agricultural land. Instead, I fear we are merely swapping one problem for another. And could I congratulate Broadland District Council on solar panels over top of a car park. Absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to get the committee to ask questions after the next gentleman has spoken, okay? Would you like to carry on?
Yeah. Good morning. The National Planning Policy Framework states sites of biodiversity should be protected and the economic and other benefits of the best, most versatile agricultural land should be recognised. It recommends small-scale solar farms should use previously developed or non-agricultural land, but if farmland is to be used, it should be of poor quality first and not BMV land. The Alderford site is almost 90% BMV land. The CPRE objects to so much BMV land being lost, and when there are other sites of lower grade agricultural or non-agricultural land available in the area, the site would contribute to the loss of tens of thousands of acres of productive Norfolk farmland if further proposed solar farms are approved. Swapping BMV land from producing food to producing energy prioritises energy security over food security. The UK already imports approximately 40% of our food. World events and climate have increased the importance of food security. Increasing imports is not environmentally sound and is short-sighted. If BMV land is proposed for a solar farm, then very special circumstances should be demonstrated why it should be used. These have failed to be demonstrated. In fact, there are very special circumstances why the Alderford site should not be used as a solar farm. At nearby Lenwade is an internationally important super colony of rare and protected Barbastelle bats, the largest group of this type in the UK. Dr. C. Packman is the principal of the Wensum Valley Barbastelle project. She objected to this site on the grounds that this site is the core sustenance zone for these barbastrels, meaning it is a major commuting and foraging zone. She states very simply, we do not consider this very ecologically sensitive location to be an appropriate site for a solar farm. She also states the super colony is of an international importance and far exceeds the criteria for SSSI and SAC designation. Recognising this, Natural England have added this super colony's key areas to the SI designations programme. However, the ecological impact assessment used in support of this application includes major points which are disputed by leading authorities and experts. Despite comments submitted by Dr. Packman as well as the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, no further bat survey work was recommended. Conservation and Tree Officer requested a hedgerow survey to be undertaken. This wasn't carried out. An ecological consultant familiar with the site states hedges act as a significant ecological corridor. Skylark plots are mentioned to mitigate the loss of field nesting, but despite Norfolk Wildlife's recommendation, no mitigation is seen to be required for lapwings. Both birds are red listed protected. The Wensum Valley is both SSSI and SAC. The river is only 150 metres from the site, with just a narrow strip of water meadow between. The potential for runoff contamination is a valid concern and raised in several objections. So there are many expert individuals and organisations that clearly have strong reservations about this site or recommend the application to be refused. The government itself states that the need for renewable energy should not override environmental protection and should avoid high-value environmental areas. In conclusion, as well as the impact of the site on the ecology, the proposed development would result in the loss of 100 acres of farmland, of which nearly 90% is BMV, for at least 35 to 40 years. The impact of losing such a significant area of BMV land is not considered to be outweighed by the benefits of the proposed solar farm. I therefore request that this application is refused. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Does the committee have anything need clarified? No? Okay. You may return to your seats. Thank you. I'd like to call Simon Betts. Mr. Betts, again, you have 5 minutes from when you start speaking.
Chair, members of the Planning Committee, my name is Simon Betts. I'm acting on behalf of the applicant and have been asked to make the following comments on their behalf. Touching first upon the scheme benefits of this proposal, I think we all accept that society needs clean and renewable energy, and this solar farm of 28 megawatt capacity would offer the following material benefits. Electricity provision for almost 8,000 homes, resulting in circa 1.5 million tonnes of carbon emissions saved. Addressing the rising cost of energy by offering more flexible, cheaper and greener energy supply as an alternative to fossil and contaminating energies, reducing the UK's reliance on imported sources of energy and therefore its energy dependency, a dual land use of the operational solar farm and agriculture with a design that enables ongoing use for animal grazing and shelter, and the over-provision far in excess of the mandatory minimum of biodiversity net gain. Touching upon public consultation, during the pre-submission stage, the applicant held a targeted community consultation and notified over 300 residents. Following careful consideration of all comments, a specific revision was made to the northern portion of the site, increasing the setback distance and replacing proposed panels at that time with additional landscaping to further screen the proposed development. Now just touching on for a few moments on some of the scheme impacts, addressing first BMV land. I'd start by saying there is no permanent loss of BMV land on the basis that the proposed development has a defined and limited lifespan of 40 years for its operation before being decommissioned and returned to agricultural use. The applicant does propose to support the use of continued agricultural use through sheep grazing. In this case, I would also highlight that significant areas of land outside the application site that would also enable a viable grid connection otherwise also lie within BMV as well, and therefore there is no reasonable alternative in this regard. Touching upon highways, the proposed development includes for the permanent widening of Hall Lane to 6 metres immediately to the east of the application site, thereby introducing improvements to the existing passing place. Construction traffic period is not inordinate with for a scheme of this nature, a relatively short 9 months, and typically for these types of schemes its peak is in the first 3 months of the period as equipment is brought to and assembled on site. We also note that the Highway Authority have no objection subject to conditions. Moving on to landscape, in this case, the LVIA clearly concludes that the proposed development would not give rise to any significant adverse effects on local landscape designations, nor will it remove any key landscape features. As the site is well contained by a combination of topography and landscaping, its impacts on a local or wider landscape would not be significant. In addition, the LVIA further concludes that the proposed development will not result in significant changes to landscape character or visual environment over the longer term, and it's also noted that officers would agree with the conclusions of the LVIA. Turning to ecology, in terms of impacts on protected species and their habitats, the applicant has worked proactively to respond to the comments of the Council's Ecology Officer and note they are now satisfied. I'd also draw attention to the fact that Natural England, as the responsible statutory consultee, has no objection to the proposed development. Moreover, the proposals include for a generous biodiversity net gain, as already mentioned and heard about. We have 10% of watercourse units, 29% of habitat units, and 63% for hedgerow units. Just want to wrap up by talking about site selection. In terms of site selection, I just wanted to qualify there is no policy requirement for undertaking a sequential search for sites for a development of this nature. The most important point is proximity to electricity grid infrastructure, and National Grid has confirmed there is sufficient free capacity to take all the energy generated from this proposed development. Careful consideration is also then given to constraints, seeking to avoid wherever possible designated and protected sites, national parks, AONB, triple SIs, green belts, flood risk areas, etc., and the avoidance of conflict with sensitive residential receptors, and finally, an interested landowner who is willing to host the solar farm. The proposed development fulfills all of these criteria with significant material benefits, as already outlined, no unacceptable adverse impacts, in compliance with all relevant national and local planning policy objectives. As such, I would urge members of the Planning Committee to support the Officer recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Betts. Any questions from the committee? Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a little question about the noise of these transformers. What do we know about how noisy they are and whether that noise will affect bats or any of the wildlife in that special scientific interest?
In terms of noise in the general sense, obviously a noise impact assessment report has been prepared and submitted with the application. That's based upon measured baseline noise survey. So obviously that establishes an understanding of what the current baseline noise levels are. I think we've already heard from the officer about controls through planning conditions, but as I understand it, the basic conclusions of that report is, beyond the site boundary, you don't experience that noise from the point of view of residential receptors. In terms of the interaction between noise and wildlife, forgive me, I'm sort of coming at the end of this process, so I haven't been involved in the planning agent, so I don't know whether that specific question has come up before or not. That might be something the officers may be able to respond to, but that's the broad point I would make in terms of noise.
If I can, help out. I mean, noise levels from the noise report are predicted to be about 32 decibels, which I'm not going to claim to be anywhere close to being an acoustician to know what 30 decibels sounds like, but as far as the no observable effect limit stands, it's 50 decibels. So this is 18 decibels below the kind of the maximum level that would otherwise be acceptable. It's not necessarily straightforward determining whether noise will impact on particular species, because impacts will vary according to the type of species. But it's, I suppose what I would say is that our ecologist hasn't raised that as being a particular issue to be concerned about, and therefore we've, in the event of her not raising that as an issue, we assume it's not an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? No? Okay, Ms. Betts, you may return to your seat. Thank you. I'd like to call the local member, Councillor Peck. Would you like to come to the front? We also have a written representation from Councillor Bullman, which will be read out after Councillor Peck has spoken.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to speak. I appreciate it. As the County Councillor for Reetham Division, which includes Swannington and Alderford, I object strongly to this application. The National Planning Policy Framework, as we've already heard, states that solar parks should be built on poor quality farmland. The land at Alderford is rated, as we've also heard, the majority of it is best and most versatile agricultural land. Broadland MP Jerome Mayhew asked the current Secretary of State for clarification of the current government's policy. They responded as follows. The government places great importance upon our agricultural and food production, and this is reflected in the National Planning Policy Framework. The framework is clear that local planning authorities should recognise the economic and other benefits of best and most versatile agricultural land. Where significant development of agricultural land is shown to be necessary, including ground-mounted solar, the planning authority should seek to use poorer quality land in preference to that of higher quality. And a number of the speakers that have already spoken have mentioned that fact. Now, I would like just to mention that at the County Council, we had a motion to full council a couple of council meetings ago. It was a cross-party motion put forward by the Conservatives and the Green Party, and it was voted on in a full majority. I think only 2 councillors voted against it. So it was completely cross-party, and the motion was that Norfolk should we should oppose all solar parks that are on best and most versatile land that are applied for in Norfolk going forward, because we've already done our bit, frankly. So as I say, only 2 councillors voted against that, and they assured me they weren't against it, they just didn't think it was strong enough. They wanted more guarantees. So if granted, this application will have a detrimental impact on wildlife as well as food production. With applications for solar parks covering over 22,000 acres of good quality Norfolk farmland having been submitted over the last 18 months, and many more coming forward, this is a massive threat to our future food production. In this increasingly uncertain world, our future food supply will become a matter of national security. Solar panels should be restricted to brownfield sites, on top of buildings, or in certain cases, poor quality land. In my division alone, 3 applications for solar parks have recently been granted, and a further 3, of which this is one, are being considered. This, in addition to the 4 cable routes supporting offshore wind energy production, which are causing chaos for my residents, and will continue to do so for another 10 years as they pass through my division, the planning authority has a responsibility to consider the cumulative effect of all these planning applications. I understand there are barber-steel bats, as we've heard from the previous speaker, in and around this site. Natural England recently published new guidelines on barber-steel bats, which, as you know, stopped advanced plans to build the Western Link, which would have completed the ring road round Norwich. Those promoting solar parks are quite happy to stop the building of a 3-mile stretch of road, but hypocritically overlook the demise of barber-style bats if it interferes with one of their pet projects. To cover vast swathes of the Norfolk countryside in plastic and glass. And I think one of the previous speakers said that, well, it's okay, in 40 years' time this will go back to being agricultural land. It may well do, but it will not be best and most versatile then, because solar panels biodegrade over a 10-year period, and they're leaching microplastics into the soil. So whilst that may be a very good objective to bring it back into food production, it won't be the quality of land that was originally destroyed. None of this energy, by the way, will stay in Norfolk, but will be transmitted by the national grid to London and the South East. And as I said before, I think Norfolk has already done its share. to help the country. This authority recently turned down a similar application for a solar park in Corston, which is in my division, and I thank them for that. I think it was a good decision. And the reason you turned it down...
Councillor Peck, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
I was just going to say thank you for doing that, because if you read your reasons for turning that down, they're exactly the same that could be applied to this site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned about leaching of plastic into the ground. What evidence, where did you get that from? What evidence have you got for that?
I think you'll find that is it's a known fact. I mean, if you look it up, you can Google it, or you can look at the facts. They leach plastic. Many of them have to be replaced after 10 years because they biodegrade and their efficiency fades away. I mean, they're plastic and glass. You know what plastic and glass like. You've got a computer.
Thank you. I'd like to return to your seat, please. Can I ask Ben to read out written representation from Councillor Borman?
Thank you, Chair. Just reading this out as Councillor Borman's not able to be here today. So these are his words. Given the significant impact that this application would have on the environment, I believe that it is imperative that the members of the Planning Committee visit the site prior to the meeting in order that a full impact assessment can be completed. It's my contention that the visual impact of this development is such that it would be extremely detrimental to the visual amenity of the area, rendering it a blot on the landscape and an eyesore. My objections are as follows. 1, that the high quality of the affected farmland, which is predominantly BMV, is such that approval of the application would be clearly against government policy. In particular, it is clear that BMV land is undervalued as a national asset and that Norfolk's crop yields, which are excellent due to the land being flat, good quality and sustainable, is not being given due weight. 2, little or no consideration has been given to the use of brownfield sites, which should always be the preference for any development. Indeed, the presence of a nearby brownfield site would make that an obvious choice over the one applied for, which makes this current application untenable and unsustainable. 3, that there is no coherent plan for any solar farm locations in Norfolk, and that we are losing some of the country's best agricultural land, let alone the counties, through a short-sighted approach both locally and nationally. If the local planning committees do not recognise and challenge this, then who will? 4, I do not support putting electricity generation over national food production, but feel they are of equal importance and one should not be considered at the expense of the other. 5, that this is good quality farmland and cannot be replaced elsewhere in the county or the country for the duration of the project. We already farm what land we can in the UK with respect to cropping, and the loss of this land for a decade or more means we have to replace lost production with imports, undermining the government's plans for net zero. 6, that traditionally animals are used on the lower value land as they do not produce as heavy energy density as crops. Sheep are a non-intensively reared animal. Arguing grazing sheep over under panels will still provide food is like comparing a trickling stream to an ocean. 7, the site is in the Wensum Valley near several conservation sites of varying grades, in which projects of this nature should be especially scrutinised. In particular, due to the proximity to the Wensum, which is a SAC and a SSI river, it's inadvisable and highly likely to be detrimental to the environment, despite the applicant's assertion to the contrary. Indeed, the applicant's lack of proper investigation is unacceptable. In particular, it's very likely that the Barbastell bat feeding zone will potentially be impacted by the development of this site. 8, despite comments from the county's highways, I have real concerns about the impact to road safety during the build and the operation of the site. In short, I am implacably opposed to this application and suggest that the applicant consider other more suitable sites, particularly those which are brownfield. For the record, this application is also heartily opposed by local residents whose views I represent. And just to reiterate, to start and finish it, those are Councillor Borman's views.
Thank you. All right, we go direct to discussion. Who would like to start? Eleanor.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I do appreciate the video that was supplied to committee members. I think that helped show the area clearly, and it did highlight residents' concerns about the impact of this potential application on the character of the landscape and the impact on traffic on narrow roads. And also, as we've heard, there is a threat to wildlife and potential habitat destruction if this application goes ahead. But there is considerable government policy and guidance to support this application, and that has been helpfully highlighted in the officer's report. On the 20th of January this year, the government published a 14-page report on the possible effect of global biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse on UK national security. This situation is caused by climate change. That poses far more of a risk to our national security, our wildlife and our food production than the loss nationally of maybe 2% of agricultural land, which is currently being marked for renewable energy projects by the government. We need to radically change the way we produce the energy we use in this country, and we're not doing so enough at the moment. Traffic impact has been raised. There will be a traffic impact, obviously, for the installation phase, which is about 9 months. After that, there'll be monthly maintenance visits, so it's a temporary impact on those rural roads. The panels also are temporary. Now, I know 40 years doesn't sound like temporary. Many of us won't be here in that time, but they could be removed in a serious emergency situation, such as war, if we needed to return that land back to food production. This is not the same as putting a road or new housing estate on that land. So it is temporary. The use of the land for grazing or leaving the land fallow underneath the panels can help the soil to rejuvenate. It will give it a rest from intensive chemically enhanced farming practices, which we do again currently use in this country and is causing us problems as well, particularly in terms of nutrient neutrality. I personally would like to see solar panels installed in future at higher levels. These are not particularly high, because I think that would allow for a wider range of agricultural farming practices to happen underneath the panels. Unfortunately, that's not happening in this, that's not being put forward in this application, but I would like to see it in the future. The biggest threat to our food production in this country is climate change. Climate change will ensure we won't be able to use our agricultural land in the future in the same way for growing the same types of crops as we currently do. Objectors have also noted the cumulative impact of solar and other renewable installations in the east. And I think that's a very good point to make, because it is entirely true. There will be a cumulative impact, because for areas on the east side of the country, like Lincolnshire and East Anglia, it just so happens that they are the most suitable locations for both solar and wind renewable infrastructure. We will expect to see a number of applications coming forward. And the other thing is that solar installations need to be near transmission lines. So that also reduces, unfortunately, the choice of the locations we have for putting in solar infrastructure. And also has been pointed out, I agree, in an ideal situation, we need to be minimising the installation of solar on the best and most versatile agricultural land, particularly grades 1 and 2. We do need to be using non-productive land, rooftops, car parks, but we no longer have the time to ensure this happens practically on the scale that is needed. We need all these approaches, not just one or other, to ensure we have sufficient energy in this country to wean ourselves off fossil fuels. We live increasingly in energy-intensive lifestyles. Everybody uses their phones. We're increasing electric cars. you know, when you look 100 years ago, we weren't using anything like the amount of energy that we're currently using, and we all want to continue with those lifestyles. That energy has to come from somewhere. This application will provide power to offset the annual electricity usage of approximately, it's just over 7,600 homes a year. That is beneficial for the district. There is also a significant uplift in biodiversity net gain in this application, which I'm pleased to see. This is a really difficult application. I'm under no illusion that there will be impacts if this goes ahead, particularly on the landscape, the visual impact. There will be impacts on the wildlife. But none of these decisions of this kind are easy to make. Overall, I think that the benefits outweigh the harms, so I will be voting for this application.
Thank you, Anna. Very well summed up. I've got Bibin next, please.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I understand that the application will generate electricity from clean, renewable and sustainable sources. The solar farm will generate capacity of approximately 28 megawatts, which is enough to power approximately 7,670 homes and save approximately 1.5 million tons of carbon dioxide over the 40 period of operation. However, we are losing a significant area of best and most versatile agriculture land. If we face another pandemic or a war situation and we have to close our borders for a significant period of time, how are we going to feed ourselves? I'm not saying that this particular land is going to feed the entire country, but something is better than nothing. So when I balance generating the renewable energy against the food production, I give more weight to safeguarding our farmland. For that reason, I cannot support this application. Thank you.
Okay. I think the officer did say about less than 1% of land is used for solar farms in this country, and we do have a large and resilient food supply. I know 40% is imported, but that does include things like you said, like strawberries from Spain or things from Africa or whatever. So I slightly disagree with your opinion there, but thank you for raising that. I've got Adrian next, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Listening to a lot of what Councillor Laming says, that there's certainly bits of it that I agree with, and your comment there around the 7,600 homes this would power is positive, but it's not going to be in Broadland. So it will be Broadland land that's lost, but probably that energy will not remain here. It will go out to the grid, and we may be looking at the wider picture of the country, I get, but actually this could be land lost in Broadland, but actually we are sending the electricity via the grid external to us. So picking up on what Councillor Baby said there about the loss of the land and the cumulative effect of 40 years worth of food production being lost. 40 years is a generation, and 40 years worth of loss of agricultural generation is an effect on the local economy as well, which I think we should also bear in mind. This cumulative effect for me is something that we need to bear in mind, that we keep losing agricultural land, and 40 years isn't, I get the terminology is officially temporary. 40 years isn't really temporary. You know, as I say, it is a generation that we're looking to lose this land for. And again, I hear the comments that land could, or this land could be reverted back to agricultural land if it was suddenly needed in an emergency. But it's not going to be BMV land if it's regenerated as soon as that solar panels are removed. We heard that in terms of whether that's in 40 years or whether that was in an emergency situation. So for me, the loss of the land is outweighing, and the loss of food, the food security is outweighing the energy security that we also need to secure in the country. And I think in line with one of the previous applications that was mentioned earlier, the Corston one, this one, having looked at them, looks very similar to me, and for me, my objections, and I look to refuse this application on the same basis as the Corston application was refused.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Betts? I'm just interested to know what sort of food production was on that land before this application came before us. Yeah, please. Yeah.
Yes, sorry, I'll have to give that one a pass because my involvement in this project, unfortunately, has been at the sort of front end and the back end, and therefore I've not been a planning agent throughout, and therefore I've not been subject to the details. So, unfortunately, I'm not able to give that sort of clarification, but I'm sure that could be provided as a follow-up during the delegated period.
Okay, thank you. Oh. Would you like to tell us?
Hello, I'm a resident and I've known that land for 60 years. It's traditionally used for heavy grain crops, wheat, barley, root crops like sugar beet, all essential, heavy, good crops that are grown on flat, sunny Norfolk land and that give good yields. Your wheat yields for the average eastern counties are averaging at about 8 tonnes and can go up to 12 tonnes per hectare.
I just wanted to come in and just pick up a couple of things, nothing other than just bits of clarity, I suppose. First of all, I'll take the land, the BMV side of things. It's really useful. Thank you for the help in terms of what's been grown on there. But it's worth noting, and I'm sure we're aware anyway, we can't force the landowner to grow crops on the land. So if they chose not to, we've got the same land, but it's doing nothing, you could argue. On the other hand as well, just taking the point that was made by Councillor Crotch in terms of the grid, well, we don't know where the energy would go. It might go to Broadland residents, but also in turn, we get energy delivered to us in this area from other parts of the country as well. So, you know, I may be looking at this in a slightly broader perspective, but we do our bit, other places do their bit, and we will benefit from reduced energy demand on the grid from fossil fuels. So that's the balance to consider in the mix here, I'd say.
Okay, I've got Ken next, please. Ken?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Lamming made some very broad points about most of the sides that she is supporting. But what I feel very strongly is that there are, over this 40-year period, and in the very near future, there are many other areas and facilities that can take the solar panels, and we shouldn't sort of live in thinking what's going to happen in 40 years. We have a responsibility to our children and grandchildren, and that is the importance, as Councillor Groach made, of the points I was going to make, in regard to the importance of maintaining, as the government has stated many times that we should, this BMV land. And although I've considered very carefully, I'm not in favour of supporting this application, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, next.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to say a few words in support of Eleanor. This country has an overwhelming need for solar panels and for renewable energies. This council declared a climate emergency a couple of years ago, and that has to mean something. It means that if we don't do something, renewable, if we don't do something to protect the environment, then we aren't, as Eleanor says, we aren't going to be growing anything here. some of those decisions that we have to make may be painful decisions. Some of them might mean that we have to change the way we live our lives. I think this is really important that we support things like this, because if nobody really wants to have a solar farm in their back garden, but it's really important as a county, as a district, that we prove to our residents that we're serious about this climate emergency. This is the time to stand up. This is the time where you say to your grandchildren and your children's children that I was the one who stood up for renewable energies. I was the one that helped clean the environment by making small decisions like this. We've already heard that there's only 1% or 2% chance of 1%, 2% of the land that's available for growing crops that's going to be used for solar farms. So it's a very small amount, which I don't think is going to affect our overall capacity as a country for growing food. It's a temporary loss of land, and the planning policy states there's a presumption in favour of these sort of proposals. And we heard right at the beginning that has to be a significant disadvantage to this. Not just it's a balance, it's just in balance, it's we're in favour one way or the other. It has to be a significant disadvantage in order for this site to be rejected. We've lost planning appeals before for this sort of thing, and we've had all of the agencies look at this, and they don't see any issues with it, and we're not the experts here. We have to rely on their expertise and not hearsay and not information that can't be backed up. We have to look at it black and white. We have to look at the hard facts, and it is a hard decision. Somebody has to make these decisions. But I feel like it's our time to stand up and stand up for the environment. Because if we don't, who is? Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Adrian, you had another comment to make?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a slightly contrary view in some respects of that, just coming back to food. And this council did put the Food Innovation Centre in, which is hugely successful. And I think we all support what that does in terms of keeping food production local, both in terms of, again, the environmental aspects of keeping it local so it's not driving all around the country. And so, as well as one of the things that we do support and have stated, as well as the climate emergency that Councillor Orber rightly refers to, is the fact that we do also have the Food Innovation Centre that supports our principles of keeping food production local. So I think, again, that looks at the loss of the agricultural land, and I come back to the ministerial statement on protecting the best agricultural land against solar applications, and there should be this balance to use either previously developed land or brownfield land. So there is this real balance still here regarding the loss of agricultural land, and again, we can talk around whether it's 1 or 2%, but it's still 1 or 2% of agricultural land that we do need to keep food security. So just give that balance in terms of both the environmental side, but in terms of the economic side, and the fact that we support Food Innovation Centre here to keep food production local.
Okay, thank you, Adrian.
Excuse me, Chair. May I just make a point which
certainly.
may or may not be useful? Food security and energy security aren't mutually exclusive. Councillor Crotchley referred to the Food Innovation Centre, which is an amazing thing that this council is involved in. There is planning permission for that whole food enterprise park to be powered by a solar farm in the South Norfolk district, the cable route of which will pass through both South Norfolk and Broadland district council areas. So that's a good example of sometimes they fit hand in hand, and I think it's important not to see them as separate items. They are often interlinked and they're not mutually exclusive. So one often needs the other to be able to continue.
Thank you. I would urge the committee to really take in what Eleanor has said, because I completely agree with what Eleanor has stated in her summing up there. We have no statutory objections to this. We need renewable energy, and I will be supporting this. So we're going to go to the vote. You have your recommendation on page 36 of your report, along with the conditions, and it is to authorise the Assistant Director of Planning to approve, subject to the completion of a legal agreement to secure off-site skylight plots and conditions. All those in favour of this application, please raise your hand. That's 4, Chair. Okay, all those against?
That's 5 against, Chair, so that's fallen.
Do you have a very significant reason why we should reject this application? Because that's what you'll need. Adrian.
Chair, I would just refer us back to the decision that the Planning Committee took in respect of a previous one, which was...
Adrian, we can't really consider other applications.
No, I'm using the wording.
We're looking at this one.
I'm using the wording from that, the committee, which is, and if you'll just bear with me, Chair, in terms of what it says, and it talked around, and so the proposal I would suggest that we use is that it's loss of BMV land across the site for 40 years, and the policies that it refers to is policy 2, 10 and 3 of the GNLP and GC 2 and 5 of the Broadland Development Plan. So if that's helpful in terms of referring back, which is the reason I was mentioning the previous application, to use the relevant reference points is where I was coming from, Chair, if that was helpful.
Yeah, I'll come in and Chair makes a very good point. We should obviously consider applications that we have in front of us, not go back to ones we've had before. However, the points that have been raised, and I've been listening to the conversation, have clearly been relating to BMV primarily. I don't think anyone was proposing any other reasons for refusal on this that I heard. No, I don't think they were. So in terms of a refusal reasons, then yes, if that's where we were going with it, then I think your proposal is as you've suggested really, which is the loss of grade 2 and 3A BMV for the period. Then we can, is it 40 or 42 years? We've got. Yeah, so then we've got 42 years on this one. And then those policies are the relevant ones in terms of the 2 and 3 and the relevant bullet points within the GNLP, and also policies GC2 and GC5 of the Development Management DPD. We'll finesse that wording if that's acceptable to members, but that's the principle that I think you would then go to the vote on in terms of looking to refuse this application on.
Right, we'll go to the vote. Sorry, get my teeth in. Go to the vote for refusal. All those who wish to refuse. Oh, sorry, Ken. Yes.
Although the officer said the points that I referred to were perhaps not immediately relevant, what we surely have got to bear in mind is the points that have been made very strongly by the 3 public speakers and by Councillor Crouch. There are numerous alternatives to how, where potentially the importance, of course, which I accept as Councillor Lanning said, of the need for energy, but there is also need for food and, bear in mind, for Broadland, which is part of my responsibilities as well. So I certainly would support the refusal of this, and I would have thought that the points that have been made by members of the public and the relevant councillors would certainly make sure that that would be adequate. And if it was refused and there was an appeal, I'm equally sure that the appeal would not be supported. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. going to go for...
Sorry.
Yes, thanks. All right. All those in favour of refusing this application, then please raise your hand.
That's 5, Chair.
All those against?
That's 4, Chair, so it's been refused.
Okay, this application's been refused, thank you. I'm going to have a 5-minute break.